Welcome. Today we are covering one question we were able to have with a researcher on this topic of political division. Alan Abramowitz is a professor of political science at Emory University. And we were able to talk, or at least ask one question with the professor recently. So let's get right to that. Make sure this is showing. Okay. He works at the College of Art and Sciences at Emory University in political science. He's the professor emeritus of political science at that university. One question with Alan Abramowitz, professor of political science, Emory University. He has a PhD from Stanford University, an MA from Stanford University, and a BA from the University of Rochester. Very well educated. Alan I. Abramowitz is the Alban W. Barkley Professor of Political Science at Emory University, Atlanta, Georgia. He received his BA from the University of Rochester in '69, his PhD from Stanford University in '76. Dr. Abramowitz has authored or co-authored 6 books, dozens of contributions to edited volumes, and more than 50 articles in political science journals dealing with political parties, elections, and voting behavior in the United States. He's also one of the nation's leading election forecasters. So very, very well-versed on elections. He also wrote a book, The Polarized Public, Why American Government is So Dysfunctional, examines the causes and consequences of growing partisan polarization amongst political leaders and ordinary Americans. This is the article that I interviewed, or I tried to reach out to him about. It was in the American Interest, and this was published in 2013, a decade ago. It was by Professor Abramowitz and also Professor Fiorina. We did get a hold of Professor Fiorina, and Professor Fiorina did agree to do an interview in about a month or two. So this is another one where we were fortunate to get everybody associated with the study. So is politics polarized or sorted? Just what's wrong with our politics anyways? In 2013, he wrote that article. Are we polarized? Why doesn't our politics seem to work? Is it because we're politically polarized? That's what he's saying in 2013. Not only are ordinary Americans no more polarized than in the past, according to Fiorina, they are turned off by the growing polarization of the political class and therefore less likely to support either party or even to vote. Yet, he says, leaders of both parties continue to ignore the views of the moderate majority and to cater to the extremists who dominate party primaries and caucuses. Meanwhile, those who still vote are limited to the polarized choices presented by the two parties, even though most of them would prefer more moderate alternatives. That's what Professor Fiorina is saying. This is what the professor we're talking about is saying in response. So this was written by Alan Abramowitz and Professor Morris Fiorina. Fiorina says, it's the political leaders are polarized. The American public isn't that polarized. And then here's Abramowitz's response to Fiorina. Despite its popularity in some circles, however, the elite theory of polarization is deeply flawed. So Abramowitz is saying this theory that the elites are polarized and the public is not is deeply flawed. You're wrong, basically, Fiorina is what Abramowitz is saying. Political elites have certainly contributed to the rise of polarization over the past several decades. But one cannot understand the rise of polarization without taking into account important changes in American society, such as increasing racial and ethnic diversity, the decline of the traditional family, and growing economic inequality. Along with the actions of political leaders, these societal trends have resulted in dramatic changes in the makeup of the electoral coalition supporting the Democratic and Republican parties, changes that are driving the parties apart. Perhaps the most important change affecting the American party system over the past several decades has been the growing racial and ethnic diversity of the American electorate. Between 1992 and 2012, the non-white share of the presidential electorate more than doubled from 13 to 28%. This has resulted in growing racial divide between the Democratic and Republican electoral coalitions. So Abramowitz is saying the public is polarized, and that's why the elites are polarized. He's contrasting it with the theory that the public isn't polarized, and it's just the elites that are. And you'll remember we did another one question with another survey that asked the same thing, and that survey also showed, no, the public is just as polarized as the politicians. It's not just the politicians. So we talked to Professor Abramowitz, and I said, I wanted to ask you just one question. Has political polarization increased since you wrote this article in 2013? So this is 10 years ago. You said, wow, polarization is so bad, it's messing up Congress. Has it increased since you wrote this article 10 years ago? Yes, quite a lot. So I know, not a full interview, but he didn't just say yes. Yes, it's improved. It's increased a lot. So political polarization was pretty bad in 2013, to the point that two different professors got together and said, okay, what in the American interest, how bad is political polarization? Can we even work together as society in 2013? Bad enough to write this article. And this professor saying it's much worse now. Quite a lot. It's quite a lot worse now than it was a decade ago when I wrote this article, raising alarm bells. That's what this professor said. So again, I know that's not a full in-depth interview, but when you add up all the one question responses we got and all the interviews, it begins to make a pattern. I'm not going to give that pattern now because I want to be unbiased and let people come as they are. This is a safe place. But we're already starting to see patterns when you put all this together. It's very good information collectively. All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll see you soon.